everyone, great to have you back. It's Kaylee and Immanuel here, and we want you to know that you are loved and there is a purpose for your life. And today we are going to talk about therapy from a male's perspective. I have a male here who is my husband.
Do you?
And yes, he has some experience with a therapy session. And yeah, we wanted to discuss therapy from a men's perspective. I have a few questions that I will ask Immanuel, and enjoy.
All right.
So, first question. So a lot of men may see therapy as unnecessary, or may say they don't need it. So what made you open to therapy?
Good question. Talking about emotions from a male perspective is something that's, I think, undervalued, underappreciated, and underlooked. I think men say they don't need it because that's kind of in our nature. We don't like to talk about emotions. So it's always safer to hide from emotions and to hide from the reality of some of the things that are happening in our hearts and deep fears and insecurities and trauma. We naturally tend to find other ways of dealing with it rather than actually being open and addressing them. It's always easier.
Do you think, oh, you're going to say something else?
And to add why I chose to have my first therapy session 2 days ago was because I saw that you did it. And obviously, yeah, girls or women, they like to talk about their emotions and it's really useful. And I'm seeing it from a guy's perspective. I'm like, oh, it's great. You get to talk about your emotions. I mean, it's not like you've ever done that before, but great that you can do it. And then I'm like, well, yeah, but I have emotions too, right? And so I realized, we talked about it and we came to the conclusion, oh, it would be interesting for me as well to talk about some deep stuff and also how I'm relating to everything that's happening. As you may or may not know, we've had quite a journey. Katie's life was quite a journey. I've had my own story and we've had definitely interesting experiences. And if you never talk about them, if you never work them through, then there's always something that like untapped ground or untapped potential in you, things to solve and for you to develop. So that was my decision.
So I find that interesting, is when you say work through things, I think the typical connotation of working through is something very heavy or some kind of trauma. So how do you see working through, or who are you talking to when you say you should work through things? If that makes sense.
Everyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be something traumatic. It can be small things that can keep you from, reaching your potential. Reaching your potential in terms of speaking to people at a level that you can approach them with confidence. And I think it can be small things, but it can be big things. And small things can, when you talk about seemingly small things, you might realize they're actually bigger than you think. And I think everyone has something to talk about. So I think it applies to everyone.
Okay, so we're talking to all men.
Yeah.
Everyone, all men. And why then would you say it's important for men to talk about emotions?
Well, I would say, what is the consequence of not talking about emotions? And men are emotional beings. Women maybe more, but men are as well. And I think that women naturally have more channels to allow them to address emotions than men have, or men allow themselves to have. And so when they don't, then you end up in areas of, for example, releasing them in really unhealthy ways. One could end up in an addiction because they have this fear or they have this pain they've never been able to articulate or even maybe reflect and understand it in the first place, and then release it, get free from it. And families, there's so many families that break, and I think issues or family issues, maybe past family issues that have been unresolved, you take that into every friendship, every interaction that you have. I think another problem I see, or another danger I see, is when people are not proactive about what they have experienced and what they are experiencing, and they just keep it to themselves. There will be a point when it drips over, and it can be an explosion, it can also be an implosion. But there can be something really dangerous in not allowing yourself to release something. Yeah.
That's such a good point. And how then would you say we as women, or we as a friend of a man, can encourage a man to be open or to consider something like therapy?
I'm not too sure whether it's necessarily the role of a woman, and you have to differentiate like in what position that woman is, right? If it's a wife, no, do it, right? Like make the time, create the space and the environment, and then start. I think we have to start with the principle of why is it good, why is it important, and once a man grasps it, great. But I think it should rather be encouraged from a male perspective. As me, for example, setting a good example for someone else, and as maybe the church setting a good example in, if there was like male groups, to make that a priority.
To make therapy a priority?
It can be therapy. It doesn't have to be therapy as well. You can talk about emotions in small groups as well. And it starts with the culture. It starts with the culture, but therapy can also be something that's part of what the church is offering. And I think there's not enough therapy available in churches. I wouldn't know, in my church, I wouldn't necessarily know where to go for an actual therapist. Like we over spiritualize sometimes, you know, especially in churches, we tend to be like, oh, like, let's pray about it, you know, but maybe there's more than to just pray about things and to talk or give advice, you know. Sometimes you have to really take the time and be an expert in those kind of areas.
Yep. So that's something the church can do, and then maybe men who have male friends, what would you recommend there?
I think that talking about deep things has a huge potential to deepening a friendship, because we're so used to, as guy friendships, we're so used to you know, just talking about whatever and doing whatever, but actually talking about deep stuff, you know. I wonder, like, whoever is watching right now, how much of your male friends know actually of the deep things of your heart, right? But this has so much potential. So it starts with the trust, and it starts with maybe also you making yourself vulnerable. Be like, hey, I want to deepen my relationship with you, let me share something, and it goes from there.
Yeah.
Okay,
so men can help by first being open and bringing up the topic, I guess, or a topic. And I would also ask then, from the position of a wife, this is your chance to review me. How did I do with encouraging you to get therapy? how did I do, or what worked well in our conversations about therapy and emotions?
I think you set a good example. And this is what you start with.
Yeah.
Like, you set a good example, and you show me the value of it, right? You show me that what you're talking about in your counseling, in your therapy, I learn about myself, but I'm seeing what you're learning. I'm seeing how you're progressing, how you're like exploring and uncovering things that you've never even thought about, but that are deep as part of you, and that are maybe part of some pain from your past. And so I'm like, wow, I'm not perfect. I have a past. There have been good things, there have been not so good things. Let me see what I can do, because there's healing for everyone in so many different areas. And this is where I was encouraged.
That's so interesting, because to me, I'm thinking Immanuel became interested in therapy, and I said, hey babe, have you thought about getting therapy too? But actually, it's not really that. It's not really me saying or telling to go to therapy, but it's the example, and it's being open about the actual things I'm learning. It's more that than anything else. Like you were saying earlier, sharing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Very insightful, thank you. And our final question would be, is there a relationship or an example in the Bible that also encourages you when it comes to the idea of sharing and of therapy?
So I read a book recently called The Invested Life, and it gave the encouragement to find yourself a Paul in your life, and find yourself a Barnabas in your life. And the Paul example is from the perspective of Timothy. Timothy is like a young Christian. He's still young and inexperienced, and he has this older person who's like really wise and he knows a lot, and his name is Paul. And Paul teaches him a lot, and so he can look up to Paul and he can receive wisdom from Paul, but he can also share with Paul what he has as like fears and tribulation, what he's going through. And this is kind of like a father-son principle. We might not have that in like a natural way, the natural fathers, but we can find spiritual fathers for that. So have someone like Paul in your life, I think. That can be for males and females, where you can have those kind of conversations. But equally, Barnabas, from the perspective of Paul, was a bit more of like same level, and they could go through life in a bit of like a brotherly way, where they're both sharing and where they're both sharing their weaknesses, and that way they can do life together and they can encourage each other. So find yourself like a Paul and find yourself a Barnabas and go from there. That can be accompanied by therapy, and that can be your therapy as well.
Yeah, love that. Thank you for sharing with us, and we hope that you found that interesting. Have you ever been to therapy? And if so, what's the best thing you took from your therapy? Share with us. That's not on order, but we'd love you to share with us. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, let us know and we can talk more about this topic. I've been having therapy for like 2 months, so there's plenty to share. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe and like, and see you next time. Bye.